Morning, everyone. Hello. We're going to discuss, like I did last Tuesday, may do a thing about this. We're going to compare some Conservative policies with Labour policies on a particular issue. And it's going to be asylum because that was the big news last week. So I'm just going to begin by, first of all, sizing my screen so I can see your chat. But I'm going to begin by just highlighting what are the core issues. Because the media do like to conflate a lot of things. So there are three core issues that need dealing with. And the three asylum issues are the asylum backlog, we'll go over in a moment, asylum seeker accommodation. Because we've got such a large backlog, we need a lot of accommodation, and that has come under fire. And channel crossings caused by the fact, of course, we have no safe legal routes. So just to highlight where we are in terms of what is the scale of the problem, what's the reality of the problem, not necessarily what the media will say. In terms of the backlog, it looks like this. We can compare this right back to when the Conservatives were in power, started to be in power again, 2010, all the way up to now. This is the end of 2022. We don't have this year's result. We have partial results in, but obviously we don't have the full, any particular quarter in. So this is as it was at the end of last year. You will be unsurprised to learn that once we get 2023s on, it will be higher still. We're going to need to extend the y-axis there. In terms of what we're looking at with this chart, the solid line is applications. Now, that's quite important. You can see that although applications are higher than they were, say, 6 years ago, they're not massively higher compared to the backlog at any rate. And they are, of course, higher since Brexit because we no longer have our, it's not just as a result of Brexit. We specifically dropped all of our agreements. We were part of the Dublin Agreement, for example, but we also had bilateral agreements with France on various areas, and we just binned them all, which means there is no one in Europe really doing anything about, the people trying to make their way here to seek asylum, who may or may not have a valid case. The blue lines are those, in terms of the backlog, in terms of the chart part, are asylum seekers who've been waiting 6 months or less. That's sort of okay. Really, you want to get asylum claims done within a couple of months, but it is possible that some will be more challenging. If, some people fleeing war or persecution may not have much in the way of personal documents, for example. So, you can understand that it could take longer. The sort of cerise bar is more than 6 months. And then the little purple at the top, which is not very much, is pending further review. But you could argue that the purple bar at the top is not going to be very much, because to be pending further review, the case has to have been looked at. And we have a situation at the moment where the Conservatives are just not processing the claims. That is why the backlog has skyrocketed. The number of claims has not skyrocketed. The backlog has, though, because they're simply not dealing with it. In terms of another chart to have a look at the situation we're in, because then channel crossings, we can see that this is a new phenomenon, right? If we look here, the BBC produced this. Now, this was last year. This is a year old. Again, it has, and so that 2022 data was 2022 up to that point, because this chart is from the 16th of August, 2022, just to be clear. Obviously, it can't be the 16th of August, 2023, because that would be tomorrow. I don't have a time machine. That's why I'm not a lottery winner. But you can see in 2018, that sort of purple bar is pretty much along the x-axis, using the scale on the y-axis that is required for the more recent number of channel crossings. 2018, it was like there were none, didn't exist as a problem. 2019, there were a few more. 2020, a lot more, right? 2021, loads more. Now, 2022, remember, that was just partial. That's sort of gone up higher still. So we can see that this is a problem that has only occurred in the last few years, and it has occurred because we closed down safe legal routes. The only asylum seekers who have anything like a safe legal route have been people from Ukraine, people from Hong Kong, a couple of other countries as well. It has not, for example, included people from Afghanistan. We promised to look after the people we were abandoning from Afghanistan when we, not us unilaterally, but as part of the Western Alliance, allowed the Taliban to come steamrolling in again. But we have not allowed safe legal routes. Hence, the asylum seekers who tragically died at the weekend, just before the weekend when the boat sank, they were Afghans. And the reason they were having to make that dangerous channel crossing is because we have not allowed a safe legal way for people from Afghanistan to claim asylum unless they can physically make it to Britain, and our government are physically stopping them from doing that. So in terms of what is the difference, because the way it's characterized in the news is, I'm going to put this back up to remind ourselves of the issues. The way it's characterized in the media is the Tories have got these plans. Oh, they don't seem to be working. Well, it's better than Labour. What's Labour's plan? Labour don't seem to have a plan. So let's look at the actual difference between them. Now, I will point out, this could be an interesting one, because obviously this, the issue of asylum strays into authoritarian territory, which many of us on the liberal left are sometimes uncomfortable with some of Labour's positions. But we have to bear in mind there are a lot of people on the left who are also a bit authoritarian as well. But nonetheless, there is still a stark difference between them. So when it comes to the asylum backlog, this is the difference between the Conservatives and Labour. So the Conservatives, Robert Jenrick, who, by the way, is the immigration minister, Suella Braverman is the Home Secretary, so she's in overall charge of asylum policy, but you obviously have junior ministers who take part of individual policy. Robert Jenrick is the immigration minister, so he also is the junior minister in charge of asylum policy. He says the backlog is a good thing. He says that it acts as a deterrent to stop people coming across. Now, we know that's not true. Again, I'm just going to get rid of this and put up the backlog chart again. We can see that the backlog just keeps getting higher and higher, and it hasn't led to a reduction in applications. There's been no reduction in applications. So we know it's not acting as a deterrent. So we know he's talking rubbish there. So either he is lying or he's an idiot. Either is possible, because he is actually an idiot if you've ever listened to him before. The other aspect to Tory policy is various ways to stop people claiming asylum. So remember, they've shut down safe legal ways to claim asylum. That is them attempting to reduce the overall number of asylum claims. The problem is, because the vast majority, even by the government's own figures, are genuine, it doesn't work. If someone's fleeing death and torture, then a risky channel crossing isn't going to put them off. So that's the Conservatives' policies there. In fact, Emmett Oakland is saying there, basically what all this boils down to is we need safe routes and to process asylum claims properly. Yes, ultimately. Now, in terms of Labour's policy, now these are their policies. This is not my reading of it. This is what they've said. They have explicit policies of clearing the backlog. So they, for example, are making no attempt to say there is any advantage in having a backlog. They have also expressed commitment to international standards and laws. So even though some of the rhetoric that comes across in the media, and bear in mind, the media will absolutely deliberately misinform what Labour have said. There was a big case a week ago when, like, Sky News and a couple of others said, even The Guardian said, oh, Labour would carry on using the barges. And it's like, no, Stephen Kinnock had not said that. What Stephen Kinnock said is they will remove people from those barges as quickly as possible. He gave no indication. What he basically said is, on day one of the Labour government, people will be in those barges, right? That's what he said. He says we can't clear them out on the first day, but we will be clearing them out as soon as possible. The implication in the way it was reported is that Labour would use them, albeit temporarily. The implication being they'd even put new asylum seekers on the barges. Labour have not said that. They said their aim is to reduce the backlog and actually take people out of that. And he's actually called it unfit accommodation. But Labour specifically committing to international standards and laws also means that they are not going to attempt to try and just refuse asylum applications or shove them somewhere else. They've also expressed policies which aim to work internationally to reduce the pressures which cause refugees to flee home. We've got to bear in mind, a lot of the reason why at certain times the number of refugees in the world increases is because of political instability in some parts of the world. And sometimes we can influence that for the better. Quite often we influence it sometimes we're actually partially responsible, but we can certainly influence things for the better. So they aim to work with international partners to ease those pressures as well. Lee saying there, morning from the thumbnail, I thought Yvette Cooper was special presenter. Oh, well, Phil will have to do, yes. I don't think Yvette Cooper is at the moment going to accept any invitation to appear herself. How is an asylum seeker supposed to know what Tory legislation is anyway? Do they watch the Parliament channel? Well, this is the point I keep trying to make to Tories who talk rubbish. Like, someone flee it. First of all, how much does even politically interested people, how much do you know about what's going on in, say, you know, I'm going to do what the Tory MP said last year. I'm not going to name a specific country and upset them, but we'll say a person from a political trouble spot, or we could just say someone from Afghanistan, because I don't care about pissing the Taliban off. What they're going to do. So someone from Afghanistan, like, how much do we know about really what's going on in Afghanistan? The big stuff, yeah. How much do we know about their government policies on, say, immigration themselves? What's the Taliban? What's Afghanistan's policies on immigration and asylum? I ain't got a clue, and I'm politically interested. I ain't got a clue. So, of course, an average person from Afghanistan is not going to know what the details of our asylum policy are. It's absolute nonsense, this thing. Oh, yeah, we'll do this thing and it'll deter them from coming. No, it bloody won't. They haven't got a clue what our asylum system's like until they get here. All they know of Britain is what we promote. So, you know, the cultural promotion we engage in. They get here. Oh, my goodness. Some of them must think it's absolutely terrible when they're being then thrown onto a plague barge, but they don't know that in advance. And even if they do, many of them are, it's better than what the Taliban want to do with them. But anyway, Tories let the cat out of the bag. They don't really want to fix the migrant issue as it acts as a deterrent to coming. Well, I mean, that's what the immigration minister has said. Although what I will point out, and I pointed out in my own video on it recently, is Rishi Sunak says he wants to clear the backlog. His own immigration minister says he doesn't. So, like, there's straight away a difference of policy there. The prime minister is expressing one policy and his immigration minister is expressing the opposite. So that straight away just shows chaos within government. I don't even know what the formal government policy is because two different members of the government are saying contradictory things about it. So that's why I put in here under the Conservatives, Jenrick says backlog is good. I'm not putting the Conservatives have a policy of keeping the backlog or extending it, because I don't know whether that's true or not, because they're being inconsistent. Says the barge will be empty by the time the change in leadership arrives. No, unfortunately, all that's caused it to be evacuated at the moment is Legionella. They'll clear it out. It'll take a week, and then they'll start shoving people in it again. No, I'm afraid the barge is going to be a death trap yet again. So anyway, that's asylum backlog, difference between Conservatives and Labour. For those who say there is no difference between them, there's absolutely a difference. The Conservatives do not seem, or they seem confused about whether the backlog is good or bad. The way they're trying to clear the backlog is not by processing claims, but by trying to stop people coming here in the first place, by physically trying to block them. Like, was it the Daily Mail today? Let me have a quick check. Someone was having a pop at the French, going, oh, it was the Daily Express. I do apologise. The Daily Mail says something else awful. The Daily Express, dear France, for £480 million, can you actually stop the boats? No, we're not paying them £500 million to stop the boats. We're paying them £500 million to patrol. The French are obeying international laws. International law does not stop someone getting into a boat and crossing the channel. There's no law against it at all. So no, they're not going to stop them. That's not what we're paying them for. What was the Daily Mail said something stupid. Oh no, they're moaning about TikTok and Rupert Murdoch. Right, next one was how do we deal with the accommodation? Should we do next? No, let's do channel crossings first because that's related. So the channel crossings. So the Conservatives' policies are. Do you know what? I'm actually going. No, I'll leave it there. I'll move my head out the way when I need to. So the Conservatives paying £500 million to France to patrol. That's what they're paying them for. You know, they try and tell us, oh no, we're paying them to stop the boats. No, we're not. We can't tell them to stop the boat. That's illegal. They can't take the money for that. It's just to patrol. It's just to pay for some patrols, right? It doesn't stop the crossings at all. The Rwanda scheme, which the government's own figures, this is the government's own figures, not some independent analysis. The government's own figures says will cost. Remember, we've already paid out at the moment and haven't sent anyone across. It's going to cost £169,000 per asylum seeker. We're going to send a tiny number of asylum seekers to Rwanda at a cost of a government's own figures, £169,000 per person. At the moment, we haven't sent anyone because at the moment it is deemed illegal. So until the Supreme Court says otherwise, it's deemed illegal. And then, and remember, and this is their contradictory thing on that, because they're also arguing this is a deterrent. Oh, we're going to send them to Rwanda. That'll deter them, right? But here's the thing. They keep, because people in this country aren't actually arseholes. I know they keep voting Tory, but they're not, most people aren't actually, they don't actually vote for the nasty party. They vote for this other party, right? That they think that they're going to get. So to calm people down, Swella Braverman and the like say, oh no, Rwanda, it's the land of opportunity. They're going to have, we're building these brilliant homes for them, which we're not, by the way. All the homes being built that you're seeing on the telly are not for the asylum seekers. That's something else. But anyway, we're building these marvelous homes, right? They're not going to a concentration camp at all. It'll be absolutely wonderful. They're going to have a brilliant future. And it's like, so how does this act as a deterrent? Because this is what the Conservatives are trying to say, right? Sending a tiny number, and it's a few hundred a year. Remember, we have hundreds in a single day coming across the channel. That's hundreds of new asylum seekers a day. We usually have, hang on, what is it? Let me get the chart back. No, I'm just going to read the chart on here. We have in excess of 20,000 asylum claims a year, right? Which is actually tiny compared to the immigration in general. But 20,000 asylum claims a year, right? Over. And our plan is to send a few hundred a year. So we're sending like a tiny proportion of all of our asylum seekers to a paradise because the government claim it's the land of opportunity. How's that going to deter anyone? We're saying is weed legal in Rwanda. I think everything is legal as long as it doesn't upset conservative sensibilities. I think having your own mind is illegal, though. So I don't think I'd really want to go to Rwanda. How the hell did the Conservatives get the reputation of being good with the economy? Lies. Lies. The media do not report anything in a consistent way when it comes to comparing Labour and the Conservatives. Nick saying there, £169,000 pounds per person to Rwanda. Can you imagine how much it would cost to send to the Ascension Islands? I don't need to guess. We know Jacob Rees-Mogg said so when he was minister at the time, thinking about it. £1 million. £1 million it would cost to do the same thing to the Ascension Islands. Partly because it's absolutely thousands of miles away. It's very remote. There's no actual population there, really. It's like a military base. And as you can imagine, the nearest supermarket's like 2,000 miles away. So food's very expensive to get in. It's like much worse than the Falkland Islands type scenario. So yeah, we don't need to guess. The government actually worked out a figure when back in Boris Johnson's, when he was Prime Minister, of £1 million a day, Ascension Island. So even more pricey than Rwanda. Anyway, carrying on with the Conservative policies, because they're all brilliant. The barges, now remember, at the moment, we've paid £1.6 billion to hire, not even buy, 3 barges. We only got 1. 3 of them arrived, technically, but we only had room for 1. because we have a government of an island nation, and they could only find berthing for one of them, which is in Dorset. They did think they had berthing for the other two, one in Liverpool and the other one in Edinburgh, but the local authorities there told them to bog off. So the government hadn't actually. So Swiller Braverman, who's obviously useless, hadn't actually worked out where they were going to go. So two of them had to turn back. So we've basically paid £1.6 billion for one barge, which actually can only house 220 people safely, but we're going to shove 500 people on it. So we've paid £1.6 billion for accommodation for 500 people. And the Conservatives want to hire more barges. And if people are wondering who's making money out of this, the person who owns those barges, not even a Tory donor, they're a UKIP donor. So the Tories are given 1.6 billion quid of our money to a UKIP donor for one scabby barge. And they want more barges, right? Cost of living crisis. 1.6 billion pounds is enough to have settled the nurses and doctors' payment demands, I think, or reasonable ones, the ones that would reasonably cause them to call off the strike. No, we've spent it on a scabby barge to house 500 people unsafely. Anyway, that's the Conservatives' policies on accommodation. Labour's policies are, on the channel crossings. Sorry, channel crossings. Labour, I think I've got some of these mixed up here because some of this is into accommodation. I've made a mess of it already. Labour's policies on this are to negotiate a replacement for the Dublin Agreement. Now, some people, I think the Tory media today are trying to suggest that this won't work because there was a front page I saw. Now, where did I see it? Which cast doubt on it. Oh, here it is. It's in the Times, Murdoch paper. EU rejects New Deal for return of migrants. So they're trying to make out that the Conservatives have tried to arrange a replacement for the Dublin Agreement and the EU have rejected it. But it's like, but they're not trying to agree a replacement for the Dublin Agreement. They're basically saying to the EU, can you stop asylum seekers coming here? And the EU have gone, no. Rather than it being, there's no reciprocation about it. Labour have also talked about increasing funding for the National Crime Agency to tackle smuggling gangs. But obviously, you cannot tackle smuggling gangs unless you create safe legal routes. But they have also said to set up clear, legal and safe routes for asylum seekers. I have put links, by the way, in the description below to the sources for all this as well, by the way. So those are Labour's main policies on that and dealing with the channel crossings in order to reducing them back down to the levels they were, which was basically none. So closer links with the EU so that we can actually have asylum seekers going to the place that would be best for them, particularly if there's like family links. And yes, that will mean that someone who tries to claim an asylum in Italy might well come here. But, you know, we had fewer asylum claims when we were in the Dublin Agreement. It's really that simple. Increase funding for tackling the smuggling gangs, you know, when we can actually deal with, because once you've got safe legal routes, all of a sudden the smuggling gangs are just people traffickers at that point. And then the clear legal and safe routes for asylum seekers. I'm probably going to have to go into the accommodation because I have a feeling I mucked this up. Yes. So in terms of the accommodation, so I've already really gone over them because it's related to the channel crossings. The Conservatives' policy is of paying billions to hire Tory donor-owned hotels, UKIP donor-owned barges. And do you know what they're planning to do next? They're planning to use disused officers and student accommodation. Who do you think owns those? Oh, Tory donors. That's why the Tories, of course, were very keen for people, even clerical workers who can work perfectly well from home. They were really pushing employers to get them back in the office. Why? Because Tories own offices, right? But they've now got another little earner here because there are offices standing empty because some businesses have worked out, actually, no, it's helpful to have flexible work and it's actually good. So there's not as much office space needed. So the government are now planning on using it for asylum seeker accommodation. There'll be plenty of readies in that. Plenty of readies in that. And the student accommodation, same thing. Tory donors will, the student accommodation that gets earmarked for it will be, because you think to yourself, well, why is there a lot of student accommodation going begging? It was in the news recently. There's a lot, and I mean a lot of students this year are going to be commuting from home because they cannot, because student loans have not gone up with inflation, so they can't afford the cost of the accommodation. So they're going to have to commute. I did a video on that a couple of days ago, I think. And so, yeah, so there's going to be student accommodation going begging because students can't afford it. So, they'll be not lowering their prices. They'll be, they're going to get the government to pay them a load of money to house asylum seekers there. We're saying they don't really care where they come from, Phil. What they really fear is darker toned skin. Well, that's quite interesting because obviously, as a result of Brexit, we have much lower levels of economic migration from the EU, which are traditionally like countries with a lot of white populations, and we have now had to compensate with much more immigration from other countries. Remember, the government is actively trying to get a trade deal with India, which is involving allowing people from India much easier access for visas in this country as well. So, if that is their aim, I don't know that it is their aim. I don't, want to call everyone racist. There's a difference between racism and xenophobia sometimes. But nonetheless, they're achieving the opposite. Anyway, Labour's policy is really quite simple on this one. Because they have specific policies of clearing the backlog, they're not unequivocal. They are unequivocal about that, clear the backlog. That means, and Stephen Kinnock, who's the shadow immigration minister, pointed it out very clearly. He said, we don't want to use these barges. We don't want to use hotels. We don't want to use military bases, and they don't want to use the offices and student accommodation either. So their policies are clearing the backlog so that we don't need to pay a load of money on expensive private accommodation. They would rather use the money for public services, not Tory donors. A couple of super chats. Thank you very much, Paul Ewan. A bit light on super chats today. Have a coffee. Well, that'll be for Graham. I don't like coffee. Helen Wilkes, £2 super chat as well. Thank you. Can't resist the promise of godlike status. Oh, there you go. Right, we'll go through some comments then, because I think I've gone through the main policies. There are other policies sort of around general issues too, dealing with asylum. But again, Labour's policies, it's two sources of them I've linked below for you. I'm sure, Ed Catflap saying, I'm sure there was something to do with Sherry Blair and Braverman having links with the Rwanda leadership. Sherry Blair's got nothing to do with it, of course, but Braverman, yes. Braverman is good pals with some of the people in the Rwandan government. So, of course, even, giving them all this money, whether or not she knows anyone will ever go there, means that she's still, because you might think to yourself, well, there can't be that many Tory donors in the Rwandan government. No, but sometimes it's not always donors that get a lot of our public money, but just mates. I mean, we had the thing with the VIP lane. Matt Hancock's pub landlord got a VIP, was back. Well, I don't think he personally did, but he lobbied on someone else's behalf. So Matt Hancock was even giving public money to basically someone who his own pub landlord wanted him to. So it's mates as well as donors as well. And in this case, it's very much mates. Tories don't want to reduce asylum waiting list so that there is a feeling of being under attack in certain sections of the Express and Mail reading population. There is an element of that as well. The problem is, I would argue at the moment, it's not working. It can work in theory. It can work in theory, but it is not working at the moment because in recent polling, only 10% of people thought the Conservatives were doing well on asylum. Now, so you have a situation at the moment. The people who maybe approve of the Conservatives' hardline rhetoric on asylum, they're probably going to vote Reform UK, right? Because otherwise, if they vote Tory, they're voting for incompetence. Doesn't matter that they might approve of what the Tories' position on it, the delivery is poor. Or if they want to vote for someone who'll just get things done, they'll vote Labour. So it's really that simple. You say, give Phil a tea bag. Yeah, that'll just go in the bin as well. I don't like tea either. I know I'm British, but I actually just don't like tea. So I have squash. I have like Vimto or at the moment cola today, but Has anyone calculated just how much the Tories are wasting on corruption? Would be good for Labour to shout that from the rooftops. It's actually very difficult. I mean, for a start, just as a staggering sum, in the first year of Rishi Sunak being Chancellor, £100 billion disappeared. £100 billion in 1 year disappeared in smoke. That doesn't include, that's not the full extent of everything he wasted. That is just money that was spent on something for which we got nothing. Remember, we also spent over the odds on something. So we did get some PPE that was worthwhile, remember, but we paid over the odds for it. So the extra is still Tory mismanagement or corruption. So the full total would be quite, but the fact that in Rishi Sunak's first year as Chancellor, £100 billion went out of the Treasury and no one can say anything. We didn't get anything for it. It was either spent on PPE that was unusable, or it was spent on the test and trace system, which Parliament concluded didn't actually deliver anything at all. It's like we might as well have not had it. It included furlough fraud, business support fraud, businesses who took out the loans and then just went bust. It includes money that just went somewhere. We just don't know where it went. 100 billion. 100 billion. Not even Yorkshire tea. No, not even Yorkshire tea. But there we go. Anyway, Uncle Heavy saying, last comment here, it says, hardly about the Ukrainian refugees. They're white and nominally Christian, whilst those on the boats are overwhelmingly neither. Am I being cynical? You are very likely on the money when it comes to some people, at least, shall we say, yes. Some people, at least. But there we go. We will leave it there. Thank you very much for coming on. Don't forget to click like and to subscribe, of course. Details for various things in the description below, including how you can access Patreon if you would like to join Graham for the LBC show as well. Thank you very much for coming on. Have a very good day, everyone. And until next time, I'll see you later.